Kansas suffers a tough road loss in Stillwater. How do they bounce back, especially coming out of a bye? Let's talk about it.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Welcome into Booth Review. What's up? I'm Kent Swanson. This is my guy, Brandon McAnderson. B-Mac, what's up, buddy?
What's happening, man? I'm glad to be here.
Dude, I know there's a lot of things that are, reason to be disappointed and bummed, but I still am excited to be talking some Hawks football today with you specifically. B-Mac, you were there. I know you were there in Stillwater. Tough loss. I want to say before we get into the game, how good does it feel to have the angst and emotions of watching a college football team that you care about, watching this team expecting to win on the road in Stillwater. I know it's difficult, but at the same time, it does speak to the expectations that have changed around this program the last few years to know that this one hurts differently than probably a lot of games in recent memory for this program.
Absolutely. It kind of feels like, missing opportunities. It doesn't actually feel that much different than the Texas game in that, late into the third quarter, it's 20-14 and KU's not playing well. So they're on the road playing the number 3 team in the country and they're not playing well. This week, they're up 8 points at Oklahoma State, having botched 3 extra points, having basically no run game to speak of, really not playing well on defense from a tackling perspective, and they still have the lead. So I think it's about a team that is on the brink of something special, but is learning about how to finish on the road. And I think it speaks volumes about the progress of the program that they can be in these games and have opportunities that we would say they should have won. And they didn't play that well. And then there was, other than Beans being in fuego, the team overall didn't play that well. And I know that at halftime, that's what Coach Leipold said, is that we're lucky to be up. And it was true. And that was a team that you see that's a complete team in many ways.
Well, they were up with 6.5 minutes left in the game. And maybe even a little bit less than that. They were up for a large chunk of that game, and obviously it was a disappointing loss. And it kind of feels good to be in a place where we're licking wounds a little bit, because it feels different than expecting it, right? That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt, and it doesn't mean there's not a lot we need to talk about in this game either, though, because I think there's a lot of little things with this game that are worth kind of addressing, and just some of the little things that have kept this team from going on the road and doing something that is hard. Two things. Stillwater is a tough place to win, as Kansas State learned a week prior, as Kansas learned this week. Oklahoma State's playing some better football too. They got hot early, and Bowman was playing better football than I have seen him play all season, possibly in his entire career early. Obviously, we were talking a little bit about this, and this is kind of there's something defensively I want to talk about, because in general, I am a Brian Borland fan. I have defended him a lot of different times. I've supported him a lot of different times. I think this defense structurally, and the way that this team likes to play, I think they are susceptible to fast starts by opposing teams, because we talk a lot about about some of the soft coverage choices that this team will make. And I do think there's a lot of info gathering that Brian Borland likes to do early in the game. And I do think he likes to do that from, some softer shells, from some off coverages. And it just felt like Kansas was giving up a lot of easy completions earlier in the game. The RPO game was working a little bit. It just felt like, Kansas was giving up some easy plays early on. And I think, Bowman was absolutely dealing for Oklahoma State and throwing the ball better than we've seen him throw. I think Alan Bowman played early on. He was great, candidly, but Kansas still made it a little easy on him. And I think that's one thing, is Kansas kind of let that fast start unravel on them a little bit. And you would have liked to see them be a little bit more aggressive early, even though they're still in that kind of fact finding mode early in the game. And I think that's something that's happened to them in the past too.
Absolutely. And to Oklahoma State's credit, I thought that they noticed one thing on film specifically was how much the linebacking core struggled to get into drops against Texas in that RPO structure. So I wasn't surprised to see them run a screen early on. And it wasn't just the screen. They ended up hitting him hitting the running back Oliver over the middle several times, or excuse me, Ollie Gordon several times because the linebackers were getting so deep in their drops that there was a ton of room inside. And that's a product of Texas was able to feast on Kansas on those 12 and 15-yard digs and slants, and the linebackers weren't involved because of how well Texas was running the ball. To Kansas' credit, until that 43-yard run late in the first half, they did okay against the run. There wasn't as if they were chomping up yardage. Most of Ollie Gordon's yards were in the receiving game, but I thought they took advantage of that one thing. And I thought Alan Bowman was inconsistent most of the season, and he was inconsistent. He was erratic, accurate wise in that game. He had some. He probably threw 3 balls that should have been intercepted. He is not good when the initial read is not there. He was not good after the play broke down, and he did not complete a pass probably over 15 yards in the air. So I think what you mean by that shell coverage, it really allowed him to get comfortable in a way that he hasn't been able to. And then once that got going, Oklahoma State's offensive line played really well, and that's a benefit of playing with pace is that you can neutralize the defensive line. And if you watch Kansas football play, the defensive line is the meat and potatoes of what they do. So when you're running that type of pace, you do limit pass rush. When you're getting the ball out quick, you limit pass rush. When you're running screens, you limit pass rush. So all they were doing was controlling pass rush, taking advantage of spaces they were given, and Kansas missed tackles. And like you said, they are susceptible to fast starts. Here's the stat for you. Between this year and last year, Kansas has trailed by 10 plus points in the first quarter of every road game except Nevada and Oklahoma last year. Oklahoma, remember, they were tied at 14 last year. This year, they were up on Nevada. Every game, every road game, they have been down 10 plus points this year and last year. So it's something that they have to work on. And I think it centers not just around stylistic play, it centers around tackling. They've just struggled to tackle on the road in a different way than they do at home.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And they continue to see some tackles and the explosive plays. Like that was something that was, successful for Oklahoma State. They were able to generate some explosive plays early in the game too. And like that is, Kansas has been so good when their defense is playing their best. It's forcing long sustained drives and forcing teams into third downs, and that's been a calling card. And like you said, I think Bowman became a lot more inconsistent late in the game when it became less about, Oklahoma State started fast. They went a little bit of tempo early. And again, I think part of some of the tempo stuff is Kansas likes to simplify. It seems like, when they play against tempo too, that's kind of just feels like another one of their calling cards when they're having to deal with some of this tempo. But yeah, they tackling was a big piece of it. Like you said, like Bowman wasn't chucking it down the field, but he was just, hitting guys in the stride on some slants. He was hitting the screen game. And yeah, like some of those explosives really came back to bite Kansas late, put him behind the 8 ball. And then you saw, a good chunk of game where Kansas finally settled in. And it took them 14 points and a couple of possessions on defense to settle in. But I thought, Alan Bowman came back down to earth. Credit Kansas a little bit for that, for sure. And, this defense started kind of getting into what they typically try to do, right? And, they forced some field goals. They forced, some punts. They got off the field with more consistency. But it was just too slow of a start on defense, and too hot of a go of it with Oklahoma State offensively.
Yeah, and I think Ollie Gordon is a unique back in that he's lengthy and strong, good straight line runner, better open field runner than you kind of would imagine on film. And one of the things too is Austin Booker was dealing with some stuff with his knee, and he didn't look. He only looked different in one way. He did not have a quick get off on the snap. I thought everything else in terms of changing direction, finishing people with power, everything else was about close to what we're used to seeing. His get off on the snap was not close. So I think that was the one thing that the injury affected, but he had an impact on the game. He played well.
Yeah, and Jeremy Robinson too. Like he's dealing with some stuff. He's playing through some stuff. I don't believe we saw Hayden Hatcher in this game. Like,
No.
we talked about this group getting tested, with the defensive line, and you felt good about it. And hopefully Booker will be back at full strength when they play at Oklahoma next week. And hopefully, this bye week gives some guys a chance to kind of get some rest. We'll get into some more on the offensive side of the ball against Oklahoma State. Obviously, want to talk a little bit about Home Field Apparel. We are excited to be partnering with them at KC Sports Network. Make sure you check out their incredible selection of Kansas gear. Promo code NoSeats23 will get you, I believe, 15% off your order when you go to Home Field Apparel. All kinds of crazy, awesome Kansas apparel, both KU football, KU basketball. They got you covered for the entirety of the KU sports season. We're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
BMAC, it was really fun after that 14-0. I mean, KU got hot for, offensively. Kind of after that, they get down 4. They punt their first possession. Oklahoma State gets up 14-0, and then KU's offense gets a little bit of hot, and they get explosive. And that was just what was like. They were airing it out. I mean, like I kind of talked about on this game, like, I kind of want to see them continue to play, to run the football and try to run the football effectively. But now they just challenged that secondary and they made some big plays down the field. I think you talked about Quentin Skinner, if I remember correctly, in the pregame show. But watching, or in our episode last week, but just watching this team just kind of show how multiple actually means being able to do multiple things here at Kansas, where some offenses are multiple. This offense is showing you why, that how they actually are multiple and able to attack in different ways. And Jason Bean played out of his mind, especially early in that game.
Yeah, he was amazing. And what I liked about Q, and I did say that in my pregame show, the Crimson and Blue show, we are on an hour and a half before game time on the Jayhawk radio app or the Jayhawk Athletics app. Check us out, man, if you want some pregame coverage as well. But what I liked about Q for this game is that Bean, we talked about it before, a Bean game plan is going to have X amount of deep balls, because it's honestly like, it's like you're playing to his greatest strength and simultaneously playing to their greatest weaknesses. I thought that their safeties did not match up well with our receivers and tight ends, and that was a problem the entire game. And they took advantage of it. They were able to get protection, which they didn't have an issue protecting all day. And what I'll say about Oklahoma State on defense is Colin Oliver is the best individual player we played this year. He was wrecking that game. If you look at some of the things we were trying to do with counter, with the tackle pull, which has been a big part of our game, he was lighting up that he was lighting up the lead blocker in a way that really no one else has, and it was compressing those holes. And if you look at Oklahoma State, they played a 3-man front similar to BYU, except the guys they had playing in those spots were 290 pounds, and then their nose was 346 pounds. So what you were seeing is Kansas was not getting the type of movement that we've been seeing previously, and it's mostly because we've been an off-tackle team. I think it took, like you mentioned, one of the reasons the running game struggled is because it was convenient for Kansas to pass, but they couldn't find a play calling rhythm. I would say they maybe only had one period of running the football play calling rhythm where I think Highshaw had 11-yarder, a 12-yarder, a 6-yarder, a 7-yarder, and then they hit Q Skinner on his first touchdown. That was basically the only running rhythm that they got, and they got away from off tackle in that period of time, and they really just weren't able to get back to it just from the way the game flowed. So I think that Oklahoma State presented some challenges, and Colin Oliver is a dude. From the pass rush, he got the sack that pinned him back on 2nd and long. I thought that was a huge play. It really took us out of a rhythm, a chance to increase a 5-point lead. So he had a big impact in the game. So I do want to make sure that we mention it.
No, for sure. And KU's run game definitely did struggle more than I thought it was going to, honestly. And like they tried to, hey, you know what? You got some big dudes, playing a 3 down. They tried to get a little bit on the edge a little bit. The option game didn't seem to be the same thing it was. I think it's funny. Devin Neal still averages 5.1 yards per carry,
Right.
but yeah, I think they struggled with some of their edge game was not working. They tried option a little bit more. Then they stuck with it a little bit longer than I thought they would too. Honestly, some of the option stuff. Here's something that I think that's kind of interesting about the offense though. BMAC, I talked a little bit like they were a little bit feast or famine, right? And they had some really big explosive plays and some big touchdowns. And I think you're right. They struggled to find a rhythm a little bit and consistency, specifically in the second half. Still put some points on the board, but definitely I don't think were sustaining drives and making some mistakes that you don't like this team to see. Do you know what the longest drive by number of plays was for Kansas this week?
I would say the first drive of the second half was maybe 7.
The longest drive, they had one series for 9 plays. So
Mm,
everything else, I mean, everything, and that's not that abnormal. Well, it is actually kind of abnormal for Kansas.
yeah, this year
A
for sure.
lot of their identity over the first 6 games has been, you know what, we're going to get into a lot of third and manageables, and we're going to execute those third manageables. They're gonna. I mean, they're not trying to get the third down. They're trying to get first downs. Don't get me wrong, but this team has definitely been, a little bit more ball control, a little bit more play volume. When I talk about like it being an execution game, like I feel like this team just wants to try to, they're willing and they're comfortable, in some of these third down situations and trying to just out execute you down the field, and they do it a lot. This game was definitely more, big explosive plays, big shots down the field. And granted, I mean, hitting them, I'll take them all day, right? But it was different. It was different than what we've typically seen out of this team. A lot of explosive touchdowns. I mean, 5 plays, 2 plays, 3. I mean, and then some 3 and outs mixed in there. I think there is something to be said. I think it's a really good point. There's something to be said about kind of the lack of rhythm that you saw, in some areas for the offense. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it, it
it's
felt
rich people problems, right? On offense, rich people problems. Like it takes you out of rhythm on offense, but you're bombing them down the field.
you're
So
glad to
you're
have it.
not right. It's like it is a good problem to have, but I think it did end up taking away from some of their rhythm games, some of the things that they were used to seeing them create. And I want to take the time to mention how impressive Jason Bean was. At one
Mhm.
point, he was 20 of 25 with 5 touchdowns. So he had as many incompletions as he had touchdowns, and that was still late in the third quarter. And I think that the play that impressed me the most, there's many, rolling left and hitting Skinner over the shoulder, rolling to his left and just lofting that ball perfectly to Skinner. My favorite was there was a play they called quick game to the right. It was a China concept, a hitch, and a flat with Fairchild and Devin Neal. He came off of it, didn't rush at all, took a couple back steps, got all the way back to the backside slant to Lawrence Arnold. I think it was like a 15-yard gain. It was just a crazy sequence for someone that when he got here, every time he felt pressure, he ran out of the pocket over the top. And then he would usually just be racing toward the sidelines and he'd throw the ball away. And
Mhm.
then last year, you saw him be a little bit more consistent in terms of, finding people, getting the ball down the field, definitely hitting deep balls. But that first touchdown to Trevor Wilson, he climbed the pocket and did not for 1 second think about running. He slid to the right and hit Trevor Wilson on that deep post. Like this guy, as a player, as an individual player, his peak is as high as anybody in college football. And that's crazy to say for a backup. It's also crazy to see a guy that's in his 6th year improve incrementally every week. Like he's a guy that improves every week. And I don't know about you, but I had never had Jason Bean type athleticism. If I did, I'd be escaped from the pocket very often. He doesn't. He sits in there, he reads it, he delivers, and when he doesn't have pressure, he is as good as any. When you can keep him clean and keep the guys off of him, he's as literally as good as anybody in the country. I watched that second sequence where the offense started to lose rhythm. That first interception to Trevor Wilson was a product of the wind. I don't know how else to say that. There was a huge wind gust. He was aiming for that back pylon, and that wind blew it to the front pylon, and they were able to get the pick. Look at the replay. Also, there was some questionable contact at the top of that route
Sure.
that I thought prevented Wilson from getting more separation.
Mhm.
So that was a little questionable. But honestly, I was expecting to see a Bean meltdown, and it wasn't that. It was almost exactly what Kolonicki talked about in the press conference about little things breaking down here and there, and all those leading to the collective. So getting beat on an inside rush, and now he has to get rid of the ball quickly. Not his strong suit.
Mhm.
Deflection, interception. They ran a twist stunt. Same thing. Guy gets in there. He tries to force the ball in, almost gets intercepted on the last drive. So those things were to me a product of these little things going wrong as opposed to one guy having a meltdown. I don't think that's what happened in that game.
Yeah, I don't think I would have classified it as a Jason Bean meltdown. I don't know if I haven't if some people are saying that, yeah, I don't know if I can agree with that. I do feel like it was little things here or there, and some of that is some of the lack of execution in the run game too, for sure for me. And I think part of Kansas offense is staying ahead of the sticks, and that was a slog to try to run the football as effectively as they have in past too. So putting some of the put him in some of those manageable situations. But Jason Bean, I mean, he went crazy, man. I
Yeah,
mean,
it was incredible.
he really did. I mean, 410 yards, 5 touchdowns, 12.1 yards per attempt. Obviously, there was a crazy stretch there that kind of put Kansas right back in this game. Big, long, explosive plays, and he had a phenomenal game. He had a phenomenal game, and I don't know if it's always going to look like that specific kind of game script for Kansas. Like, how many times do you think we're going to see that game script again over the next 6 games?
Well, it depends on how many road games we have. I mean, because that one felt so similar to all these other road games that I've been
Sure.
to with this team.
Yeah.
And that's it's been something that they've just the slow starts forces Kotelnicki to throw the football more, and it opens up the offense quicker than he would like to. I think that's kind of what if you look at the big passing days, I think they're almost all connected to an early deficit. And it makes him kind of adjust what he's doing and start to air it out a little bit, and that's where you start to see some hits over the top.
Yeah. But yeah, it was just like that's one. It sucks that it came in a loss.
Yeah,
It sucks that it came in a loss and a couple late turnovers and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, offensively, they did some good things. Some more sustained drives probably helped the second half a little bit better, as I think something that we might think about here. But I mean, yeah, credit to Jason being the number 2 quarterback at Kansas University. How many teams can say that? How many number 2 quarterbacks are going for 10 and 5 touchdowns? That's all I'm going to say.
and that's and he ended up going. I think towards the end of the game, we were 6 of 9 on third down with an average yards to gain of 8 yards,
Mhm.
which in the past has not been Bean's thing. He's
Yep.
not been great at converting those downs and distances. He
Mhm.
was flaming on those downs and distances. The corner route to Lawrence Arnold on 3rd and 11 early in the game, I thought was something he just hasn't really done. And he hit it perfect down the sideline early in the game. Him and Trevor Wilson, you know, with Jalen Daniels, that Luke Grimm is going to have an increase in productivity. And when it's Jason Bean, that Trevor Wilson's, and
Yep.
they're basically the same. They're two versions of the same position, but two different players. And you
Mhm.
can see the preference per the quarterback, what they like about that guy versus the other guy.
Yep, 100%. And there's just something to be said about chemistry, and it's weird how that works, right? Trevor Wilson, when he's typically not the high volume snap earner when it comes to Jalen Daniels, but and like it's kind of how it works honestly, this is how it works when you are in a college program.
Yeah.
When you are a backup quarterback and you're doing 7 reps with the ones, 3 with the twos, those twos develop some chemistry together.
Mhm.
And there's always going to be a guy that the backup quarterback's not throwing to as much that he's going to have some kind of chemistry with. That happens that's pretty normal with college kids. And so yeah, that's a good problem to have with the Trevor Wilson kind of being in the mix, right? Like, I mean, he's showing out for sure, but he's probably not getting as many reps with a Jalen Daniels as some of these other guys, the Quentin Skinners, the Lawrence Arnolds, the Luke Grimms, to your point. Whenever both quarterbacks are healthy.
Right.
But that's the point. There's, when Jason Bean's in the mix, the guys with the chemistry, are probably going to see some more opportunities, to your point. I do want to come back to the defense a little bit. It did feel like the defense kind of settled in as the game went on a little bit. Any positive takeaways that you kind of have from the defense, kind of as the game went on? I know they started slow, kind of settled in. You only gave up 25 points the rest of the game, forced some field goals. Anything that you really liked, kind of just being there in Stillwater?
What I really liked about the defense was what a luxury it is to have Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
I think they targeted his side of the field twice the entire game. I just really appreciated his ability to to really erase one side of the field and keep it off of his side almost altogether. I thought JB Brown played really explosively. I thought he probably would tell you his reads weren't as great or as good or great as they could have been, but man, was he finishing plays and finishing dudes to the ground. I thought he played really physical. The way that they played the game, they kind of limited our pass rush things that we're used to seeing with the quick game. It kind of took them out. The guy that stuck out to me was OJ Burrows. He just hustled all day. One of the forced field goals was a breakaway run that he got him from behind that he had no business. He ends up pulling down number 3. I think it was their backup running back. They forced a field goal on that possession. I just like when he's out there. He's got great range. He has been a really short tackler. And then Cornell Wheeler is a guy I just like watching. I liked when Cornell and JB play together. There's like a nice chemistry of real explosiveness between those two. So those were some things that I liked. I liked that they got off the mat and started responding. They forced a 3 and out after that second touchdown. So it wasn't as if they were just dormant the whole game. They had a slow start. They rebounded, and then there were some times where they didn't fit to something or they didn't quite execute a tackle, and that tends to happen more on the road. But it also speaks to something we've talked about here about the team deserving support. And if you look at this team, man, on the road they're giving up 38 points a game. That's this year and last year they're giving up 38 points a game. They're giving up 22 at home. Springer, turn the camera on, bro. Put this on Twitter. 38 points a game this year and last year between home and away. They give up 38 points a game on the road, 22 at home. That's with giving up 55 to Texas last year. That's included in that average. So what that tells you is they play better at home. Home field advantage is important to them. It limits communication. It allows them to get set. And that's why I think they'll have a chance against one of the best teams in the country. No, we may not get to that all today, but I think this defense is not one you should give up on. I think you should stay with these guys. They're going to keep improving. They're going to keep building depth, and they're going to keep responding.
B-Max wanting that on social is what I heard.
Come
B-Max,
on.
He wants
16-point difference, man. Come on. That's the boost, baby.
Mark that, Springer. Mark that one, please. Okay, so we're we're here at the bye, right? And this is kind of like it's a mile marker. I like that the bye sits in the middle of the season. I think we've talked about it on this show before, and it's a hallmark of a Lance Leipold team is that this team gets better as the season goes on, and it feels like they get better differently, and they continue to develop some of these guys differently as the season wears on compared to some of these other programs. Not that teams just don't naturally get better as the season goes on or anything like that. Because there's a natural progression for everyone playing the game of football. But I do feel like the acceleration and development of this group will probably be similar to what we've seen in the past. This team, you saw what they did in Lance Leipold's first year. The stark difference between what we saw them trying to block up a bunch of inferior kids on the defensive line of South Dakota versus them being able to hang with Texas, beat Texas, and hang with West Virginia and TCU at the end of the year was remarkable. And I know the results didn't look the same. The schedule got a little bit tougher in the second half of the season, but I still think Kansas showed some growth and improvement within the program and kind of ran out of steam with some injuries and obviously Jalen Daniels. But this depth is so undeniable, and watching some of these guys kind of step up and grow and develop. And you talked about Cornell Wheeler. I mean, we talk about Austin Booker, and it's just, I think we're going to see a big step from a lot of guys in the second half of the season, starting with this bye week here.
Absolutely. A guy that we haven't talked about much this season because Craig has played so well, Kalen Gervin. Got an opportunity to play more in that Oklahoma State game. He played well in that game. Quentin Lassiter got some more reps at corner. He did some good things playing tight coverage and forced them into difficult situations. And then yet another defensive tackle coming out of that room, Caleb Taylor, had a few good series where he got a knockdown, got a tackle for loss, got a pressure that ended up forcing a sack. And so there's always somebody kind of separating themselves as a contributor, and that's what I think that's what you mean by how unique Kansas is in their build, is that they are able to build with players that you've heard about and that you had some expectation for, but nobody said at the beginning of the season they thought Cornell Willer would be this important to the defense.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody thought that Jason Gilliam would be making contributions and start to push for more playing time.
Mm-hmm.
So usually when you're building depth, you're thinking, I need to steal X amount of reps so this guy can get reps. They've been able to say it's not about stealing, it's about earning the reps that are available. And
Mm-hmm.
they're producing players in a way that can live up to that standard. And I think that's been the story of the defense for the first half of the season, along with the combination of Booker and Jeremy Robinson.
Yeah, I just, I think the bye came at a good time for this team, and obviously, I mean, we know how emotionally I think how emotional this loss to Oklahoma State was for a lot of people, right? We get that. And it would have been nice for this team to be 6-1 going into the bye and having a crack at Oklahoma as a 6-1 football team ranked and probably getting game day and all that, But man, I think getting a chance for some guys to get healthy, getting a chance to just kind of hit the reset on some stuff. I think, man, we're not gonna get too far ahead of this Oklahoma game, but if I'm just looking at the outlook of the rest of the season, I think this bye comes at a perfect time for this team. Obviously, I think they'd want to get back onto the field right after that Oklahoma State loss for sure. But I just think you're going to see a really strong response in the home stretch for this team. And who knows about the status of the quarterback situation? I don't think it matters. I think Jason Bean's proven that he's going to be able to help this group compete and win some football games in the home stretch. But I'm just really excited to see what this group is capable of doing, as the season closes out.
Absolutely. And I mean, from your history, Jason B gave OU hell in his first opportunity to play against him. They almost were able to pull that game off with Jason as a starter. So I don't think there's any concern about the quarterback position. What I will say though is that this team is veteran laden. There are a lot of older
Mm-hmm.
players on this team. And the way that they responded to the initial loss with that domination of Central Florida, I think is a good indicator of what you're going to see. This team is not a team that is allowing one loss to turn to two, one loss to turn to 1.5 losses. This team has been able to put away poor performances and respond in a big way. And if you remember that Central Florida game, that was Kansas' best performance of the season by far on defense, was stopping one of the top 5, top 10 offenses in the country. So I expect them to be able to do that again, and I'm excited to see how they do it. Because now it's just not as simple as well, they struggled and maybe this team isn't what we thought, but we've got to get out of these loops of thinking that every season is just like the last. The record is the same. But if you remember last year, when they got to 5 wins, you ended up losing your quarterback halfway through that game. You fight, you lose, you're 5-1. You get to 5-2. But that felt like the train. It felt like we were on a train that we had got to the end of our destination. And it kind of felt like that all the way up into that Oklahoma State game. I feel like right now this team is just at the beginning of climbing that mountain, and I think they kind of feel the same way too. So I'm excited to see how they respond.
It's a much more balanced football team this year than it was last year, and I think that speaks to the defense. This is just a markedly improved defensive group, and it speaks to the personnel and depth. And I think that's such a big asset when it comes to trying to close this game out. And I think the schedule for the schedule is going to be interesting too, because I think there's a lot of winnable games here for Kansas, the rest of the year. I think they're going to be in every single game. Some games that might have looked a little easier 3 weeks ago are not going to be easy, but I do think there's a lot of really winnable games on this schedule left for this team to go out and do some really special things. Oklahoma's a huge test for them for sure, but I really like what's going on in the outcome. I like where this is headed for this team, because I do think, look, they didn't play their best football this last week against Oklahoma State, but they didn't look out of place. This team is done looking out of place. They didn't look, the moment's not too big for them. It's just a matter of executing and doing the little things necessary. Here's one thing, BMAC. I don't know if I might ask you a name or two, but after this Oklahoma game, and really from here on this season out, freshmen get 4 games to hold on to a red shirt. So they can appear in 4 games without losing eligibility. There's 5 games left in the regular season. Do you think we see, some younger guys maybe start to get, kind of introduced here back into the mix a little bit after the bye week?
Yeah, I know that these guys are very strategic about which games they want guys to appear. We've seen some rookies early on in the season do have some special teams roles. Quebeca basically being the only guy that's actually been in the mix on
Right.
offense. He was in a couple blocking screen like packages, and physically he's ready now. I think it's more about not wanting to use that year when they have so much depth at the position. But he's going to be a nice player moving forward. I'm excited to see some of these young players and see what they have, and that's something Leipold mentioned about this bye week. Is it's important that they get these guys ready. And we hear you, Alex. I like your idea of Kansas pulling this off, man. But we ain't gonna get all into that. But I hear you, man. And freshmen, I think that from a developmental perspective, that bye week's really important, because guys get an opportunity to get the first team reps, guys that you're looking for, guys like Sevion Morrison, who's clearly redshirting. He's a guy that's going to be an older veteran player as a seasoned vet. He's going to be something big time. So he's going to get a lot of reps this week. So there's just going to be more. It's going to be more spread out. You're going to see what guys have, and this coaching staff is going to have another opportunity to evaluate. And we know they're very good at evaluating.
Yeah, no, this can be an evaluation period. I'll tell you a fun story. I don't know if you guys ever did this at Kansas, but when I was playing in college, there was a bye week practice where like the freshman scout team offensive players would scrimmage as defensive players and vice versa. And it was it was an opportunity to kind of cross evaluate over different side of the football. A couple guys actually wound up switching sides of the ball because of it. I don't think Kansas is doing that. I don't think that's a Kansas way to do it. I doubt it. But I will say this is such an important time, like the evaluation piece of it is so crucial too, because they can give some of these young guys an uptick in reps and let some of these young guys or some of these older guys heal up, and then kind of see if there's anything that they might want to integrate into the offense in the back half of the season, or anything that they're really looking for moving forward. I know Johnny Thompson's got some buzz in the past early in the season. Who knows, what his outlook looks like late in the year. Maybe just, a little spark there as a change of pace type player. You talk about Sevy Morrison. I know there's some love for some of the young secondary players, some of the young corners like a Jameel Croft. Maybe you see him get involved a little bit. I know he's played in some capacity here early on in the year, but yeah, I'm just kind of fascinated to see, if any of these young guys might start getting some looks. There's 3 home games left in the year, so you don't have to worry about the some of the travel restrictions. I don't know, might be worth paying attention to. I'm fascinated.
Hey, why not? let's see what some of these guys got, especially guys that we've been excited about and been hearing about. That look like they're going to be players in the future. Let's get them out there and see what they got. I will say about bye week, we used to have something called the Jayhawk Bowl, and that would be the scout team versus scout team matchup. But the only real fond memory I have of it is Anthony Collins really emerged as a tackle option. He got moved at the beginning of his freshman year. He got moved from DN to D tackle to O tackle. And he had a performance late in that initial season that he was pretty impressive. And we thought, this might be a guy. And lo and behold, he was definitely a guy down the future that ended up being an Outland Trophy finalist. So it is an opportunity to learn about your players, especially in like a scrimmage situation.
For sure. But Anthony Collins was still playing offense. I was over there. Quarterbacks didn't get to play. I didn't get to switch sides when I did it. BMAC. They wouldn't let me. They made me.
What would you have played? You'd have been wide out. You'd have been like D Hop out there.
I would have been like a linebacker or a safety probably.
Oh, okay.
So a pass rusher. Just coming off the edge,
Giving that edge, living that edge life. Okay.
I'm a long arm with my barely 30-inch arm. Anyways, any final thoughts on this bye week show, BMAC? We'll get into the Oklahoma game. I'm really excited to see this team. Nothing's really changed for me. Obviously, like it's a gut-wrenching loss. It's one you feel like this team should have had last week, but like I think they'll make it up. I think they'll make it up somewhere, and I don't know what that looks like exactly. Maybe it's this week against Oklahoma, but I'm really excited to see this team get back on the field because it's still different. It's still different, guys. It's not the past. This isn't your old Kansas Jayhawks. This isn't the team. This isn't last year's team. This is a better football team than last year. So enjoy it, celebrate it, believe it, because the next 5 games are going to be a lot of fun. Anything else you got, BMAC?
Man, winning on the road is tough. I just want to let you know from my career, we had T-shirts made called Road Dogs. They made a song that they played in the stadium from 2004 to 2007 that we thought was just one of our staff members rapping or something, but the beat was just KU Road Dogs, and it was just clapping, and they would play it while we were practicing. We lost every road game until we won. We won one in '06. We won at Iowa State. But we blew a game at Baylor. We blew a game at Texas Tech. We blew 2 games at Nebraska. So it's something that happens. And it's a growth part. It's a part of the growth period. And if you want to be a championship contender, you have to learn to win on the road. This team has done it better than we did. They won against West Virginia last year. They won at Houston last year. So they're further along than we are. Than we were. I like the direction they're heading. Don't get discouraged by one loss. Put your faith in these guys. Put your faith in this staff. And I promise you, they'll get it done.
Hawks are undefeated at home this year. Better get out to the booth. Get your tickets now and get out to the booth. If there's any left, go support this team. Go support this group of kids. They deserve everything they're getting right now, and they deserve more. That's going to do it for this episode of Booth Review. For Brandon McAnderson, I'm Kent Swanson. We'll catch you later.
Peace.